Parents, imagine that you're watching a high-stakes construction project. Day after day, you watch a structure being built brick by brick. This is what it's like to watch your teenage son grow up. He's building his identity, and to form a healthy, resilient sense of self, a young man needs an integrated life, a state of being where his internal values, his secret thoughts, and his external behavior all seamlessly match. But what happens when a pornography addiction enters the picture? Well, that construction project isn't just paused, it is violently disrupted. Instead of building a unified, strong identity, the addiction forces him to construct a hidden, secret addition to his life. It creates what we in psychotherapy call a fractured self. Well, if you've recently discovered that your son is viewing pornography, or if you deeply suspect that he's hiding a digital secret, your heart is probably breaking. You might feel betrayed or angry or entirely unequipped. Well, I want you to take a deep breath. You're not alone, and your son is not broken beyond repair. Welcome back to the Parent Guide. I'm Matt Bulkley, licensed psychotherapist, and today we're pulling back the curtain on the psychology of the double life, looking at what the research says about how pornography alters the developing teenage brain and outlining the exact levels of intervention that you can use, from at-home tools to wilderness therapy, to bring your teen boy back to wholeness. If you want to understand what is truly happening inside your son's heart and mind right now, hit the subscribe button, because we're diving deep today. Well, parents, to fix a problem, we first have to understand its architecture. What does a pornography habit actually do to a young man's psyche? Well, in developmental psychology, we frequently look to Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And Erikson noted that the core foundational task of the teenage years is identity versus role confusion. So a teenager's primary biological and psychological job is to figure out who he is. But when pornography enters his daily routine, it forces him to live a double life, trapping him in a state of perpetual role confusion. He splits himself into two distinct personas. First, there is the persona. This is the version of your son that he presents to you, his teachers, his coaches, and his peers. He smiles, he does his homework, he plays sports, plays video game with friends. He looks like he's a compliant, standard, good guy. But behind closed doors, in the dead of the night, he slips into the shadow. This is his secret, shame-fueled identity in the digital world. Here is the tragedy of this fracture. The split prevents him from knowing who he truly is. He stops developing organically. Instead of learning how to navigate real-world emotions, awkward social interactions, and healthy desires, he becomes an actor playing a part. He loses touch with his genuine self before he even has the chance to fully form it. Now, as a parent, you might ask, well, Matt, isn't this just a phase? Didn't generations before him look at magazines? Well, this is where we must look at the science, because today's digital landscape is entirely different. According to a landmark study that was published in JAMA Psychiatry, neuroscientists found that frequent pornography viewing is associated with reduction in gray matter in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, an area is heavily linked to the brain's reward system. So when a teen boy uses high-speed internet pornography, his brain is flooded with unprecedented levels of dopamine, just that chemical responsible for drive, motivation, and pleasure. And it mimics a biological jackpot because the adolescent brain is in a critical window of neuroplasticity. It begins to rewire itself around this artificial hyper-stimulating reward loop. So let's look at a realistic scenario to see how this plays out in real life. We'll call him Ethan. Ethan is 15, straight A student. He's a cross-country runner. And his parents think that he's thriving, but Ethan has been watching pornography every night for a year. And at first, it was curiosity, but now it's a compulsion. When he feels stressed about an exam, his brain doesn't seek out a walk or a conversation with his dad or a healthy coping mechanism. His neural pathways have been paved to seek the dopamine spike of the screen. But immediately after the screen goes black, the shame sets in, and Ethan looks in the mirror and he thinks, man, if my parents knew who I really was, they wouldn't love me. And to survive that intense emotional pain, Ethan thickens the wall between his persona and his shadow, and the fracture deepens. Living this double life takes a massive, round-the-clock psychological toll. The longer the fracture exists, the deeper the roots grow. So let's break down how this impacts him right now and what happens if it goes unaddressed into adulthood. So in the short term, you will see three major warning signs. Number one, hyper-vigilance and anxiety. So imagine living the constant fear of getting caught. Every footstep outside his bedroom door, every time you pick up his phone, his nervous system spikes. He's living in a perpetual fight or flight state, which spikes cortisol and induces chronic anxiety. Second is the emotional withdrawal. True intimacy requires being known. And because your son desperately fears being truly known, he will subconsciously pull away from you. He stops sharing his heart. He isolates in his room. And three, defensiveness and irritability. When the pressure of keeping a massive secret becomes too heavy, it leaks out. It manifests as things like unprovoked anger or mood swings or intense defensiveness over his privacy, and especially regarding his phone, his computer, or his bedroom door. Well, parents, if this pattern isn't disrupted, these coping mechanisms harden into adult personality traits. Things like anhedonia and intimacy issues. Adults who grew up with the fractured teenage self often struggle to form deep, authentic, romantic bonds, and they suffer from anhedonia, which is an ability to feel pleasure from normal everyday activities and view real relationships through a lens of performance rather than genuine connection. Things like compartmentalization, which is the psychological coping mechanism that he learns right now. Splitting his life into clean and dirty boxes will carry into his future career, to his marriage and his own parenting, and becomes his default mode of operating. It's a shame-based identity, and this is the most dangerous. Instead of feeling like a person who made a mistake, he grows up believing that he is a mistake. This toxic shame is the perfect breeding ground for secondary addictions, clinical depression, and a chronic sense of unworthiness. Parents, I know that this sounds daunting, but here is the beautiful piece of news that you need to anchor to today. Teenage brain is incredibly malleable. Thanks to that very same neuroplasticity, the fracture can be healed, but it does require us as parents to disrupt the pattern before the concrete dries on his adult identity. So if you discovered this secret life, step out of denial and step into action. You need to provide the scaffolding that he needs to integrate his life once again. For teens who are in early to moderate stages of this struggle, where they want to change and the communication lines at home are still somewhat open, we recommend what we call the gold standard of at-home intervention. And this is a structured, entirely shame-free and practical approach centered around three core tools designed specifically for the teenage brain. So number one is the Recovery Toolbox for Teens, the Breaking Free Workbook. This is an interactive, highly engaging workbook. It doesn't lecture your son. Instead, it helps him to understand his own unique triggers, helps him to unpack the psychology of his habits, and allows him to actively participate in his own healing journey. Second is the Parent Guide. And parents, you cannot fix this for him, but you must walk with him. And so this guide equips you with the exact language, healthy boundaries, the emotional tools that you need to support him without resorting to shame, screaming, or useless lectures. And then three is 101 tips for quitting porn. This is a highly practical, tactical roadmap. It gives your son daily actionable steps to resist urges, the heat of the moment, and actively rebuild those healthy neural pathways in his brain. And these three tools, they build a bridge across the fracture, allowing his shadow and his persona to fuse back into one honest, whole young man. And you can get the Recovery Toolbox for Teens in the bookstore at therapyassociates.net. It's the blue version. But let's be entirely honest as well. Sometimes the digital gravity is simply too strong. Sometimes the addiction is too deeply entrenched and the defiance is too high, or parent-child relationship has become so fractured that at-home tools or traditional outpatient therapy or in-home interventions are simply ineffective. And so when a teen is in a high-risk situation, sneaking devices escalating into riskier behaviors or completely spiraling into depression or suicidality, a radical disruption is required. And in these pervasive circumstances, the ultimate intervention is Star Guides wilderness therapy. Star Guides takes young men completely out of the digital ecosystem and places them in the healing, grounding environment of the wilderness. Well, why is this so effective for a fractured self? Well, first, provides a true digital detox. Removing the devices entirely removes the immediate toxic dopamine loop, forces his brain chemistry to naturally reset the baseline. Second, it offers specialized clinical interventions. The therapeutic care Star Guides doesn't just look at behavioral compliance, it specifically addresses the core trauma, the deep-seated shame, and the identity fracturing that was associated with the compulsive sexual behaviors. And third, facilitates a profound parent-child reset. Away from the daily friction, the screens, and the defensiveness of everyday life, Star Guides brings parents and sons back together, tears down the walls of his secret life, and it replaces them with a rock-solid foundation of honesty, vulnerability, and shared family healing. Well, parents, discovering your son's secret life is heartbreaking. It's a moment of grief for any parent, but I want you to reframe it today. It's also an invitation. By stepping in with unconditional love, clear boundaries, and the right professional tools, you can help your son to break character, step off the stage of his double life, and begin the beautiful process of becoming a whole, integrated, honest young man. So if you're ready to take the first step, check the links in the description below to access the Recovery Toolbox for Teens. And you can learn more about the life-changing work that is being done at Star Guides Wilderness Therapy. Parents, don't wait for the concrete to dry. Your son is worth the intervention. Thanks for tuning in today. I know how valuable your time is. And if this video brought you some clarity today, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with a parent who might be struggling in silence. And make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our weekly videos where we provide you as parents the latest in research, strategy, tips, advice, guidance, and support in this recovery journey. I'm Matt Bulkley. Thank you for watching, and keep fighting for your son's heart. I'll see you in the next video.